Shirley Barber's Bedtime Stories. Lost in the Forest. "Now, children," said Miss Rabbit one sunny afternoon, "I want you to go to Granny's burrow and give her a bottle of my violet cough syrup. When you arrive at the crossroads, take the path marked Primrose Lane, and that will lead you to Granny's home. But if you see those two rattling brothers, don't stop to play with them, because you know they're always getting into mischief." Off went the two rabbits, Bobtail and Fluffkin. But when they reached the crossroads, who should they see but the two naughty young rats leaning against the signpost. "Want to play marbles?" drawled Tip, rattling. But Bobtail shook his head. He hurried his sister Fluffkin along the path marked Primrose Lane and away from the rattlings, who jeered and whistled rudely after them. Bobtail and Fluffkin soon reached Granny's burrow, and she welcomed them with kisses and afternoon tea. Granny was glad to have the cough syrup because she had a tickling cough on cold nights. When it was time for them to return home, Granny told them how to find their way. "Now, when you reach the crossroads, take the path marked Cowslip Warren," she said, "and then you will soon be safely home." The sun was settling in the sky when Bobtail and Fluffkin arrived at the crossroads, and Bobtail was glad to see the two rats had gone. "This sign says Cowslip Warren," he told his sister, "and so that is our way home." As they went along the path, Fluffkin picked a bunch of lovely bluebell flowers she saw growing in the hedges. But Bobtail was becoming worried. The path they were following seemed to be leading them deeper into the forest instead of home. Soon the sun set, and shadows gathered amongst the trees, and then suddenly, ahead of them, a fox barked. Bobtail stopped. "Fluffkin, this must be the wrong path," he said. "I think we're lost. We must find a hole to spend the night, and tomorrow, when it's light, we'll try to find our way home." But Bobtail couldn't find a hole deep enough to hide in, and he could hear the fox's bark becoming closer. Fluffkin was so frightened that she trembled, and her bunch of bluebells began to tinkle like bells. "Did you call me, little bunnies?" spoke a soft, musical voice, and a beautiful blue fairy appeared before them, holding a sparkling wand in her hand. "Don't be afraid," she said. "I've come to your rescue. I will use my magic to send the fox away on a long hunt over the hills, and I will teach those naughty rattling brothers a lesson. They turned the signpost around so you would take the wrong path. That's why you became lost. And as for you, little bunnies, I will light my bluebell lamps and show you the way home." "Oh, thank you, kind fairy," chorused the little rabbits. Off they ran, their fears forgotten, along the path towards home. The fairy's comforting bluebell lamps lit up just ahead of them, all the way, until they could see the lights of Cowslip Warren. Then they ran into the arms of their mother and father, who were waiting for them at the front door. After such an adventure in the dark forest, they were safely home once more. The Royal Jewels. Under the hedge by a big green field stood a tiny shop with a notice over the door that said Edwin Beetle and Son Jewelers. If you knelt down and peered through the window, you could see Mr. Beetle and his son Benny working in the shop, and Miss Beetle with her tiny pots and pans cooking a meal, while a weeny baby beetle slept in his nutshell cradle. The beetles had a busy trade amongst the hedgerow folk, and they lived very comfortably, until one day a red tractor, as big to them as a mountain, started to plough up the green field beside their shop. The beetles, terrified, packed up the few things they could carry and fled until they reached the forest of fairyland. "Here we stay," said Miss Beetle firmly. "If we aren't safe living in fairyland, well, I don't know where we can go. Indeed, I don't." So among the twisted roots of a large tree, they did their best to start all over again and set up their tiny new shop with their home behind it. At first, few customers stopped to look at the necklaces and rings. One or two butterflies bought brooches, several mice wanted earrings, and a millipede bought a number of ankle chains. But Mr. Beetle would sadly remember the nice shop and home he once had. Nothing could ever be the same again, he thought. Then, one day, A beautiful fairy stopped and looked at the tiny shop in surprise. She knelt so she could see better. Mr. Beetle proudly showed her their finest jewellery. "These are wonderful," said the golden fairy. "Your work is so fine. May I take these 3 necklaces to show the fairy queen?" Mr. Beetle made haste to wrap the necklaces in fairy petals, flower petals, tying them into neat passes with grass blades. But Benny was worried. "What if she doesn't bring them back?" he asked after she had flown away. "She will," said Mr. Beetle. "Fairies are kind and honest. She will be back soon." Mr. Beetle was right, and the next day the golden fairy reappeared. "Mr. Beetle, the queen loves your necklaces and wants to buy all 3, she said, smiling. "She offers 3 wishes in payment, and she would also like to order a very special tiara with a matching necklace and bracelet to be made in gold and precious gem." Mr. Beetle was at first delighted, but then he became anxious. Where could he get all the gold and different coloured jewels he would need for such an order? "Dearie me," chuckled Miss Beetle. "You've got 3 wishes, haven't you? Wish first for a gold and jewel mine deep enough beneath this tree. Second, for a lovely new shop that's big enough to live in. And third, for a food cupboard that fills up again after you've taken things out." So that is what he did. Now, a quaint little shop stands among the twisted tree roots, with bay windows and a display table to attract passing mice. Inside, Mr. Beetle is always busy at his workbench, while Miss Beetle looks after Baby Beetle and cooks such delicious treats that there is nearly always a visitor dropping in for a chat and a slice of freshly baked cake. And every time Mr. Beetle needs another diamond or an emerald, Benny nips down the tunnel to the mine below. So now, whenever anyone is sad about their life, Miss Beetle simply smiles and says, "Never give up hope. Look at us. We lost everything. Then overnight things changed, and here we are, better off than we ever were before." The Unicorns. Among the golden hills of fairyland, the unicorns run wild and free among the buttercups, with the sunlight flashing from their golden hooves and horns. One midsummer day, the sun was shining, but there was a restless air about the unicorns. "Mother," said a foal named Ivory, "everything seems strange today. Is something about to happen?" "Yes, dear," replied Moonbeam, his mother. "You are too young to remember, but every midsummer day, the fairy people come in a procession up to our hill country. With a golden flute they call the unicorns to call them, and the fairy children choose one to live with them for a year." "Does the unicorn ever come back again?" asked Ivory. "Oh yes," his mother replied. "When the fairies choose a new unicorn, they return the one who was chosen the year before. 7 years ago, I was chosen. I spent the year at the fairy palace learning how to be gentle with the fairy children and giving them rides. I was taught not to kick and never to nip fingers when taking food from tiny hands." Ivory thought about all this while Moonbeam quietly cropped the sun-warmed grass. "If they choose me," said Ivory, "I shall say, 'No, I don't want to go. I want to stay with you, Mother, always.'" Moonbeam lifted her head and nuzzled her young foal. "Dear one, if you are called by the golden flute, you can't help but to go. It plays a magical note that unicorns cannot resist." Ivory tossed his head and went for a canter around the hills, scattering butterflies as he went, his white mane streaming in the fresh breeze. He was half a hillside away when a distant sweet fluting brought him to a surprise halt. He found he could not help but turn towards it, and soon he was cantering back to where all the other unicorns were gathering near the gate to their hillside. When he reached the gate, he saw the fairy folk and the flute player for the first time. They were laughing and singing as they made their way along the lane which led from the lower regions of fairyland. Ivory stepped to his mother's side and tried to hide, but the fairy children saw him and called joyfully, "That one! Oh, let's choose that one." Ivory was frightened. Not me, Mother, he pleaded. Don't let them take me. I don't want to go. It isn't fair. Moonbeam gave him a velvet kiss. Little son, it is an honor to be chosen. Don't be afraid, as we'll soon be together again. Then the fairies placed a garland of flowers around Ivory's neck, and he went with them to fairyland. A year passed, and once again it was Midsummer Day. Moonbeam gathered with the rest of the unicorns and stood patiently as the fairies chose a new unicorn to take with them to fairyland. Suddenly, Ivory was released by the fairy children. He trotted briskly up to his mother. They nuzzled lovingly, and Moonbeam said, "You've grown, little son, and was it so bad after all?" Ivory looked rather embarrassed. "I missed you, Mother, but I had a really good time. I learned how to be gentle, well-behaved unicorn. They were all very kind to me and said I was the nicest pet unicorn they had ever had." He tossed his head. "In fact, I don't know why I made such a fuss about going at all." Then he kicked up his golden heels and galloped away over the hills, scattering butterflies and flower petals and enjoying his freedom once again. Wilfred's new friends. There were 2 mouse families in Filbert Wood, the Morleys and the Montgomerys. The young mice of both families went to school at Hello Log Primary, down near the wild raspberry patch. But the Montgomery mice were rich, and their children had a scarf and umbrella, each for days when it was cold and rainy. The Morley mice, however, had no scarves at all, and only one umbrella between them. So if it began to rain when Wilfred Morley Mouse was on his way home from school, he just had to shelter in a hollow until it stopped, or his mother came with the umbrella. One day, it began to rain as Wilfred was running through the raspberry canes, so he ran to a hollow at the foot of a tree and sat down to wait. Presently, Millie Montgomery Mouse and her brother Milford came past under their umbrellas. "Who got his whiskers wet because he hasn't got an umbrella?" cheered Millie. "Wet whiskers will soon dry soon enough," said Wilfred calmly. "Who only has an old bag to put his homework in instead of a proper school bag?" sneered Milford. "I may not have a smart school bag," replied Wilfred, "but at least I do my own homework." Everyone knew Mr. Montgomery Mouse did Wilfred's sums for him, so the brother and sister decided to hurry home before Wilfred could embarrass them further. Wilfred was making himself comfortable on some fallen leaves and practicing his tables up to 8 times 11, when suddenly a beautiful fairy dressed in shades of gold ran through the raindrops and arrived at the tree. "May I share your hollow and shelter here until this rain stops?" she asked, breathlessly. Wilfred moved up to make room as the fairy settled herself and put down a small basket of raspberries she had gathered. "I'm going to make some jam when I get home," she explained, "but we could eat 1 raspberry each now to help pass the time." Wilfred was rather shy at first, never having actually spoken to a fairy before, but by the time they had eaten a raspberry each and joked about the pips, they were like old friends. The fairy told Wilfred how hard it was to rely on a magic wand, when there was thunder and lightning about. And Wilfred told the fairy about sums and tables, and was surprised to find that fairies know nothing about such things at all. They played I Spy with My Little Eye, and later Wilfred showed the fairy how to play noughts and crosses using the back page of his schoolbook. As they played, the rain slowed, and soon the round shape of Miss Morley Mouse appeared before them under her big patched umbrella. "There now, Wilfie," she chuckled. "Perhaps I needn't have come and meet you after all. This rain has almost stopped." Wilfred introduced his new friend to his mother, and they talked for a little while until the rain had stopped completely and the sun was shining brightly again. Then the fairy said a smiling goodbye to the mice and promised to call by in a few days with a pot of her raspberry jam. "Well, you are a lucky mouse," said Wilfred's mother, watching the fairy flit away like a big golden butterfly. "There's not many who get the chance to make friends with a real fairy." "Yes," agreed Wilfred happily. "And you know what, Mum? If we were rich and I had an umbrella of my own, I would never have met her at all."